Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Ropa Vieja. That's right, we're doing one of the national dishes of Cuba, which, believe it or not, translates to old clothes. Since apparently someone way back when thought the finished recipe looked like a bunch of torn, old, tattered clothing. But anyway, it's been my experience that for something to become a national dish, it has to have a lot more going for it than just a cool name. And this incredibly delicious braised beef dish certainly does. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by prepping some flank steak, which is what I have right here. And what we'll do first is cut this in half across the grain. Okay, you see those meat fibers? We're going to cut straight across those to divide this into two. And then once that's set, we will season this very generously with a mixture of kosher salt, freshly ground black pepper, and of course cayenne. And I should mention, modern versions of this recipe often use chuck instead of flank steak, because people say it's cheaper, which is true. And it works just as well, which in my opinion is definitely not true. But anyway, we'll talk more about that later. And for now, we'll just head to the stove, where we're going to brown this on both sides in a little bit of olive oil over high heat. And I'll be doing this one piece at a time so as not to crowd the pot. And not only are we doing this to flavor the beef, but we're also doing it to flavor the pot. Because by the time we have both of those pieces seared, we are going to have a beautiful looking fond on the bottom of our pot, which is the culinary term for all that caramelized goodness. And creating that before we start braising the recipe is one of the secrets here. So let's set our heat to medium. And then to all those beautifully browned bits, we'll go ahead and add one sliced red onion, along with some sliced garlic cloves and a pinch of our salt mixture. And we'll go ahead and cook that for a few minutes, stirring until they just start to soften up. At which point we can go ahead and start introducing the rest of our seasonings. And this recipe features lots of my favorites, including some ground cumin, some paprika, some dry oregano, preferably Mexican, but any type will work. We will also sneak in a little more cayenne, as well as some ground clove and a little touch of allspice. And then what we'll want to do once all that's in there is cook this stirring for exactly 1 minute. And as you might be able to see, our fond is getting better and better. And by better and better, I mean browner and browner. And then what we'll do after cooking those spices for about a minute is go ahead and deglaze with a splash of white wine. And all deglaze means is releasing all that goodness off the bottom of the pan using liquid. Okay, there should be a saying, a great cook never needs to scrub a stew pot. But anyway, we'll pour in some wine, as well as some tomato sauce or crushed tomatoes. And then we can go ahead and finish off our braising liquids with some chicken broth. Or if times are tough, you could use water. And we will go ahead and give that a quick mix before carefully placing our beef back in, along with, of course, any accumulated juices. Oh yeah, don't forget those. And by the way, if you're Cuban and you're mad I did not put more tomato in this, I'm sorry, but my version does not have quite as much as in the classical versions. All right, I like my Ropa Vieja a little more pepper and beef forward. And by the way, if you're still looking for a name for your garage band, you could do a lot worse than beef forward. But anyway, what we're going to do here is add a little more salt, at which point we'll reduce our heat to low, cover this, and simmer it for 2 hours, which is something that's just absolutely unheard of for flank steak, which is usually cooked quickly to a medium rare. But trust me, for this recipe, it really does work out. And then you remember that thing I'm always telling you about how you should try to remember what you forgot? Well, in this case, it was a couple bay leaves. So I went ahead and tossed those in and covered it back up and continued braising on low for 2 hours. At which point the meat's going to be done for this stage, but not quite fork tender. All right, there's definitely still going to be some resistance when you push that fork in, but that's totally fine. Because as you'll see, that beef is going to cook longer after we tear it up. So at this point, I really don't think we want it falling apart tender. And then what we'll do after our beef is braised is remove that from the heat and let it cool down to room temp. Because I think this comes out way better if you refrigerate it overnight and finish it the next day. So this step is optional, and you could just carry on if you want. But I'm going to go ahead and let that cool, and then cover it and pop it in the fridge overnight. And then what we'll do the next day is go ahead and pull that out. And while this is still all nice and cold, we'll go ahead and remove our beef to a plate, while at the same time turning our heat up to medium-high, because we do want this to come back to a simmer. And while we're waiting for that, we can move on to the tearing of the beef. And because we did go with flank steak, this is going to be as easy as it is enjoyable. Because by tearing with the grain, we're going to get these beautiful shreds of beef that are all going to be roughly the same length. And there's obviously going to be a lot of variation, but as far as the width, I'm shooting for something between 1/8 and 1/4 inch. Although having said that, you can tear this into as small or as large pieces as you want. I mean, you are, after all, the Omar Sharif of tearing your beef. Oh, and if you can, try to get it to look like old torn clothing. Or like the frayed bottoms of those cut-off denim shorts you tried to make that one time. You know, the ones where the pockets were longer than the bottom of the shorts. That was not a good look. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and shred that beef as shown. And then once our flank is tore up from the floor up, we can head back to the stove for final production, where we will add a whole bunch of sliced peppers to our now hopefully simmering mixture. And ideally, these peppers have been fire roasted and then cut up, which I did not take the time to do. But don't worry, Chef John's got tricks. Okay, what we'll do is sneak in a little bit of smoked paprika, which will add a little bit of a subtle smoky note in the background. We will also add in another couple key ingredients, a couple tablespoons of drained capers, as well as some sliced green pimento stuffed olives. Oh yeah, those are not just for martinis. And we can also at this point go ahead and toss in our torn beef. And then we'll take a spoon and give that a thorough mixing. And we'll wait for that to come back to a simmer. And then if we want, to balance all those sharp, briny flavors, we can go ahead and add one optional spoon of sugar. All right, up to you. But I do think that helps balance things out. And that's it. Once we have all that stirred together, we'll go ahead and reduce our heat to medium. And we'll simply let this simmer until our peppers are soft and our meat is tender, which I'll guess and say is going to take about 15 or 20 minutes. But only you will know by checking and tasting. And then what we'll do once we think it's cooked long enough, besides of course tasting and checking the seasoning, is we will turn off the heat and stir in a nice big handful of chopped cilantro. Or if you're one of these people that thinks cilantro tastes like poison, you can use some chopped parsley instead, which is not uncommon. But I love cilantro, so I'm using that. And that's it. Once that's stirred in, we are ready to serve up. Next to hopefully some rice and black beans, as well as some plantain chips, which yes, were a little too perfectly arranged. And I went ahead and finished that off with a little sprig of cilantro. And that's it. My Ropa Vieja is ready to transfer into my cabeza. Sorry, but mouth didn't rhyme. And that, my friends, is one of the most delicious, most flavorful, most interestingly textured braised beef dishes you will ever have. Okay, despite breaking all the rules about cooking with flank steak, this really is magnificent. Although what's not magnificent is eating a bay leaf, so pull those out. Oh, and by the way, this sauce really is insanely tasty, so feel free to use that same formula to braise other things. And while it is true this would be cheaper to make if you use chuck roast, also known as beef shoulder, it is just not the same. Okay, the beef flavor will be similar, although I do think the flank's a little beefier, but the real difference would be the texture of the torn meat. Alright, chuck is just going to shred into smaller pieces, and it's not going to have the same effect. Okay, so if you can afford it, please go with the flank steak. Even if it means having to wear those old clothes a little bit longer. But anyway, no matter which cut of beef you end up using, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.